how do you know when you're ready to sell?
That's a great question. We take it really seriously. You know, next to getting married and having kids, selling business is the biggest thing a lot of these people do. But a lot of people aren't ready to sell right now. So a lot of people that say they're an M&A really want to do exit planning. They want to help people get more profitable. They want to fix the financial systems, the operating systems, which is great. 90% of the time, someone wants to sell because it's...
Is that right?
Yeah, and that creates a lot of noise.
But let's just unpack that for a second.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a really important issue. So
I couldn't agree more. And the reason for that is the son or the manager is not an X Factor leader.
Yeah.
Because X Factor leaders don't tend to work for other X Factor leaders.
So when someone comes to you and says, I want to sell my business, right?
Yeah.
Walk us through what you look at to see if it's even ready to go to market.
It's very important. Sorry if I'm hesitating because it's a multifaceted, nuanced question. There's 5 or 6 what we call value drivers. The number one value driver is mathematically is always get your profit up.
Right.
Because there is going to be math and you can't escape that.
Yeah.
The second thing is
there's a limiting belief running around that if I'm going to sell my business, I'm going to need to stay in it for 2 years.
no,
3 years.
if they can't, we have the wrong buyer. Simple. Third one, and this is a big one.
When you said that the first time, I was absolutely gobsmacked.
Yeah.
Like blown away.
It's huge.
It's a little controversial, but I'm going to ask this question in a way. How do accountants mess up deals for clients?
No, I'm going to answer directly. I wrote a whole book called For Practice Accountants.
Yeah,
and I have 3 right now. It is not because in large they're incompetent at all. They're all good guys. The issue is...
Okay, there's something bothering me here for a minute. And it's not you, but it's something that's going on in the industry. There seems to be a proliferation of people now doing deferred consideration deals. What's your take on that?
No, it's fine. But let's define what we mean. I normally work on what I call a core enterprise value.
Okay.
And that core enterprise value would be paid with a combination of closing payment, the cash from the seller, and some sort of debt instrument.
Okay.
So the bottom line, it's guaranteed to be paid. So for example,
That's
so
great.
Yeah.
You definitely need to create an infographic of that and
Right.
put that out because I've not heard you say it like that.
Yeah.
If we could spend a few minutes, what's been your experience of coming on those Grown Up Business retreats?
it was great. And I grew up in Southern California. I grew up with Tony Robbins and Brian Tracy and all that. And you have that same vibe and stuff. But also the community is really important. There's a whole bunch of time just building relationships with people. I think that's very inspiring and helpful. And it gets away from the lonely at the top.
The value in talking to somebody outside your own industry should never be underestimated.
Right. That's why I think we're way ahead of the curve because of that.
We're miles ahead. So welcome along to today's episode. So this is a conversation that is long overdue. And I'm really, really keen for you to introduce you to somebody who's become a dear friend of mine, who's we've got to know each other really well over the last couple of years. He's in my F12 mastermind, has been for the last couple of years, 2 years, 3 years, possibly
3 years.
3 years now.
Yeah.
And is a absolute just a wealth of knowledge around everything to do with M&A and what it really takes to sell a business in the real world. So today's guest on the Grown Up Business Show has written 3 books. I have one of his books here called Selling Your Business. Ken Gorman is a seasoned M&A advisor with a regional director of Transworld M&A, which are a global brand, aren't they really, with offices all over the world.
Yep.
And you really specialize in helping entrepreneurs to monetize the value that they've created in their single biggest asset being their business. And you really do that in a way that is completely different to the rest of the industry in terms of your approach, which is one of the things I love about you. And also just, I think what's really special about you is that you have a level of perspective on business because of your kind of like history yourself that you bring to that conversation that's very different to navigate what for most people is a very it's a difficult process because they've never done it before, and 75% of sort of like the number of people businesses go up for sale don't sell or something like that. So
Right.
I think what you do is really different to the rest of the market, and I love the way you approach it. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Great to have you. So let's just do some basic kind of stuff in terms of. First of all, let's go back because you and I have had some private conversations where you've told me a bit about your story. Because obviously you're not from the United Kingdom, you're not from the UK,
Right.
So how did you end up here? Give us a bit of the backstory. How did you end up? Like, what was your career before you got into M&A?
So I'm originally from San Diego.
Yeah.
And I went to uni in both San Francisco and San Diego, and then I was with Ernst & Young in San Diego as a CPA chartered accountant equivalent.
Okay.
And we're going back to the 80s here, a long time. And I got very into accounting software on PCs,
Okay.
which is brand new back then. And so I would go around to all my audit clients and I would take them off their paper ledgers and install PC products. And there was a certain software that was predominant and that I did that with that ended up hiring me to be the national trainer of their resellers in the United States.
Oh, wow.
And then they sold a big project to Calvin Klein to automate Europe and needed someone to run the project. And I just so happened to be available. So I went to London for what was going to be a 6-month project and basically ended up meeting the girl. And 35 years later, still am. Yeah, exactly. So I spent about 30 years in IT, and I moved into IT. From there, I ended up running the European. I was the first guy, and I built a team to distribute software products through channels, and then that reached a natural conclusion. And I kind of did the same thing, not to go into too much detail, over and over again for 30 years. I was the UK, Europe, Middle East guy,
right?
Taking cool products and getting them, building up the channel organizations and sales organizations and stuff. I worked in the city for 12 years selling my ledgers to the big banks and stuff like that, and that was fun. Anyway, but I hit 50 and decided I was too old. My oldest team member was half my age, and I needed to do something different. And
that makes you feel old if everyone's 20.
Yeah, exactly. So, and we found this in Transworld had a great model. The way Transworld has expanded, it's very hard to hire someone to be an M&A advisor. It's a hard job. It requires so many different skills and maturity. Most of our clients are retiring, so there's an age thing. And so the way Transworld has expanded is they offer what I call an office buy-in model. So you buy into your office and it attracts a different caliber of people. We still work like one organization. We have a UK managing director. We have a CEO. We said, everything is shared, but I have a financial interest in my office and a feeling of some freedom and some independence, quasi-entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
And so they had a program to teach that, and we embraced it, loved it, and then we did a lot more education. I got my certificate in business valuation.
Okay.
And also I'm a certified M&A advisor with AMA, which is the highest designation in the U.S., and then wrote books and stuff, and so just embraced the job. And I've been doing this going on 8 years now, every single day. So several thousand days of
M&A activity.
Of mistakes is what it feels like, but my clients get the benefit of all of that. So that's kind of my background.
How many deals do you think you've done in that time?
Oh, I know I've been on well over 100 project teams, and I've probably individually closed well north of 60, I would say.
Really? 60?
Yeah, at least. Yeah. Something like that. I need to go back and count.
Yeah, no,
it's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of deals now. A lot of, and right now about a third of our deals are private equity. We do trade buyers. The one thing about Transworld is we focus in the small business space.
Right.
So it's everything, below, usually below, 10 or 15 million turnover. We have had clients up to 50 million, but it's generally owner operator. That's the key feature.
Yeah.
Owner operator needing to retire.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Love that. So let's just unpack a couple of things. First of all, the M&A space at the moment seems to be getting a lot busier, a lot more people moving into it. I've been sort of working with entrepreneurs for 21 years, and I would say the last 5 to 7 years it seems to have exploded as a kind of strategy and sort of buying businesses, and all of that kind of M&A world seems to have really taken off in the last 5 years. Is that trend that you've seen, or is that because the baby boomers are all getting to retirement age? Is that what's driving that?
Well, so it's notoriously hard to get good statistics.
Okay.
And there's lots of numbers we want to know. What percentage of businesses go up for sale and don't sell? What, all these things. My personal perception is that there just is a certain number of businesses that come up for sale and a certain number of buyers and a certain number of bona fide activity that is actually fairly consistent. And other than a couple months during COVID has always been like that.
Right.
That's my lived experience. Now, in the middle of all that, the noise that's created around M&A by everybody who wants to be involved with it is phenomenal. But we have to remember that, as something like, as you said, 70-80% of businesses that go up for sale don't sell. And that's a whole separate conversation. 90% of the people trying to buy businesses never buy a business. That's another one.
Is that right?
Yeah. And that creates a lot of noise. And so the impression. There also tends to be a huge amount of people wanting to be around the edges of M&A, doing what we call exit planning.
Right.
You know, we have our Business Exit Academy
Yeah.
to try and we're not trying to do that. We only do one thing. We're sell-side advisors, and that's a hard enough job. So it's just total focus. And you know, we're in, you know, Five Guys makes burgers. We do sell-side advisory for small businesses, and that's plenty. But a lot of people aren't ready to sell right now, so we wanted to have a place where they could go and get a more comprehensive view of the market. So a lot of people that say they're in M&A really want to do exit planning. They want to help people get more profitable. They want to fix the financial systems, the operating systems, which is great.
Yeah.
That's not the actual selling of businesses is really hard. The average private equity company will look at 100 businesses for every one they buy.
Is that right?
Yeah, and so you get all these statistics. It's a hard gig. And
I saw something really interesting on LinkedIn a couple of days ago with somebody in a VC was talking about how private equity more and more now are doing massive research on all the founders and everything using AI and pulling all kinds of data and
Sure.
points that, you know, like in terms of just trying to find, you know, a trend. They're looking for sort of trends in founders who have been successful, and what is it that, you know, that there's trying to find common sort of elements in that mix, which I just thought was interesting in terms of how much they're using AI already to kind of aggregate all that data, really.
Yeah, and that makes sense. One of the things that was and I like private equity. We, like I said, 30% of our transactions are private equity right now.
Do you think that's going to go up over the next few years? I mean, because the number of PE firms is like quadrupled or something insane. It's like absolutely exploded, right?
Yeah, and the other thing that's happened is the PE tends to be a label.
Right.
You have the big PE firms that you would recognize. You also sometimes get people that worked in those firms that come out of them and start their own firm.
Okay.
And they don't really have money. One of the things about classic private equity is they have investor money. Now, but even then it's only committed. It's not actually in their bank account. The investor has committed
so
to a certain...
it's a promise.
Yeah,
essentially.
I will fund you if you find a deal.
Okay.
Like that.
Right.
So that tends to be the model anyway. And so you get a lot of guys coming out of private equity firms that learned how to do it, because there is a specific technique that the good ones are really good at, in my opinion. We'll get into that later about replacing leadership and all that. But but a lot of these smaller guys are officially private equity, but they're just a couple guys that are scratching around hoping they can find somebody to give them $5 million to buy a company.
Right.
Versus some of the bigger guys that may have 100 employees and $1 billion under management. Do you know what I mean? But we throw them all into the private equity.
They will get that.
Yeah.
Label.
Now, the other thing that's confusing is what private equity will buy a platform company, like a platform HVAC. We were talking about HVAC. And so they'll buy it, and then they'll fund that company to go buy smaller HVAC companies to make it bigger.
Yeah, so HVAC, for anyone who is not familiar, is heating,
heating, air conditioning,
all that sort of it.
Yeah, heating, ventilation, air conditioning. So, but if one of my clients is one of the bolt-ons, they call it, it'll look like a trade sale,
right?
But it really isn't, because it's the private equity money coming through. And private equity also will fund people doing lending. So you have people doing different kinds of lending and all that. So it becomes very opaque. So you get a lot of private equity money coming through the system that can be, you know, actual private equity firms you're dealing with, bolt-ons, lending, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so when we say, will it go up? You know, there's been no shortage. If we have a good business, there's no shortage of people with money that want to talk to you.
Yeah.
But they're very picky. You know, that's just why the statistics, you have to have certain criteria and all that. But
so can we go back to the beginning?
Yeah.
Let's go back a few steps, because I think I want to walk people listening to this and through a journey, first of all. So how do you know when you're ready to sell, or when you've reached the point?
That's a great question. In my book, first chapter, I wrote about, and I call it the switch in the heart that goes off. I think one of the things that I always tell people when I first met them, I had a call with a guy that was thinking of selling yesterday, or I had a meeting at the Net in the city, and that had been organized for me, and I said to him, you know, that I say to everybody, this is one exercise that gets to be about you. And you need to get it. It's about you, and it's about your journey. This is what we need to know about. Where are you? It's your business. You're the main shareholder. Where are you? This is about you. Mostly when you're selling businesses, because the main shareholder needs to leave.
Right.
That's why we're doing it.
Right.
It's so important to remember that. That's 10% of the time. It's what I call a beam up to mothership, where maybe a younger guy has taken a company, software is common with this as far as it can, and a bigger company wants to acquire that where he
Got it.
had, but 90% of the time someone wants to sell because it's time for their life to go in another direction.
Right.
Once you get that, you get what this is really all about, and it gets out of the head and into the heart. And so then we say, when's it time to sell? Where there's a switch in the heart.
Yep.
And everybody that has that switch goes off relates to this. That chapter in my book has been, I've had more people, including the guy yesterday who'd read the book, say, man, I so related to that. He goes, this switch is flickering. I go, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's if you want to think about it, it's the universe saying it's time to go do something else. And,
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, normally it's an age thing. It's time to go sit on cruise ships or do something with your retirement.
Or maybe you've just been doing it for 20 years and you want to do something else with your life, right? I mean, some people just go, I've enjoyed doing it for 15, 20 years. It's paid off my mortgage. It's given me a great lifestyle. But actually, I want to do something else while I'm still well enough, fit enough, healthy enough to do it.
Well, and there's another aspect to that. And then they go, and I just don't have the same inspiration I used to.
Yeah.
And that's a problem, because that inspiration, that willingness to work extra hard or whatever, is what causes that entrepreneur to be successful, and the 80% of the people that aren't successful.
I think you call it founder's energy, don't you?
Well, I say X factor leader.
Yes.
Our clients are X factor leaders. They have a certain je ne sais quoi that allows them to know how to lead a business, to lead versus manage.
Yep.
To duck and dive, what you did during COVID, new product lines, new people, live through the sleepless nights, all the thing the entrepreneur does that the average person doesn't do. They are special. And the reason it was important for us to identify that is when we look for buyers, I don't like the term buyer, new owners.
I think it's a much nicer way too. Like, buyers sort of almost makes you feel like you're buying a house, right? Or you're buying a commodity.
Right.
Whereas actually you're taking over a living, breathing organism with people in it, with customers, with cash flow, it's alive. It's an entity. It's not a thing. It's a living, breathing. It's an entity, but it's a living, breathing entity.
Well, it's an entity that has a destiny.
Yes.
And your job as the new owner is to be the leader for that thing's new destiny. That's exactly right.
That, yeah.
And once you get that, these things are not, they sound philosophical or just different ways of spinning. They're not. They're actually lived experience, our way of explaining what we've noticed.
Yeah.
So if you get the right new owner that can allow the business to take its journey, it allows the current owner to lead. But that means when he leaves a leadership void that needs to be filled by somebody.
Yep.
And there's different ways of filling it. Private equity has their way of doing it. Private equity doesn't run businesses. So they'll find a good man, like the top manager in that business has to be there for them to buy it. They'll put in a gray-haired chairman from the sector that can help him, a CFO next to him, a strong board, lots of training, probably get somebody like you as his coach, and they'll support the heck out of him. Well, that's one way of doing it. A trade buyer will already have somebody that understands that sector, and on and on. But the void has to be filled somehow.
Yeah.
That it's a leadership, not a management void.
Yeah.
And once you understand that's what M&A at the small business level. By the way, this is very different if you get to the lower middle market and middle market, which is higher, bigger companies.
20 million plus mid market. Where do you put that?
Probably 30 million in enterprise value.
Right.
So you're into 100 million sales. There you get more professional boards and professional management teams, and it's more clinical. It's very, very different. I'm down at the owner, the owner operator
founder
level.
owner, founder level.
Yeah. And so once you get that's what this is about, now you know the job. So my job is to go out and walk on a journey with somebody that needs to make a life change. And we take it really seriously. Next to getting married and having kids, selling business is the biggest thing a lot of these people do.
But don't you think I think that's, for me, most people running a business are not entrepreneurs. So they're not starting a business, building it and flipping it, right? That's to me, that's an entrepreneur. Most people are business owners.
Yeah.
With nothing wrong with that, by the way, or they're CEOs. But they're running one business for 20 years.
That's right.
Whereas an entrepreneur will run something for 4 or 5 years, build it up, sell it on. I think that's a different mindset, different animal, different kind of person. There's nothing wrong with either. They're just built very differently. They don't want to play a 20-year game. They want to get in, build something, sell it, monetize it, get out, do the next thing. Whereas I think you've got people who have run a business very well. They built it up from the ground up. They put blood, sweat, and years into it, and they're at a point where I now want to realize that value, the enterprise value that you talk about.
Well, I think it's more they want to leave.
Right.
We need to go someplace else, because the best way for them to realize value out of their business is to keep it mathematically.
Or is it really?
Of course, yeah. Because if you think if I'm selling a 800,000 pound EBITDA business on average, if you read my book, those are selling for a 3 or 4 multiple. So loosely, that's years. And so
Yes.
let's say a 4.
Yep.
Well, 4 times 8, and that's 3.2 million. Right?
Yep.
Well, if I keep it 5 years,
Yeah.
I get more money.
Well, plus you'll pay slightly less tax probably.
Yeah, but it's the concept. Well, if I keep it 10 years, so it's always more profitable for me if I can to keep my business.
That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah, and well, every accountant, not every, but most of them will tell them that. Why are you selling this? Why don't you just keep it and let your son run it?
Yeah.
Or the manager run it or whatever. And the reason for that is the son or the manager is not an X Factor leader.
Yeah.
Because X Factor leaders don't tend to work for other X Factor leaders.
True.
And so the business doesn't have a natural replacement.
True. Yeah.
And so the mission becomes finding a new owner for the business that is an X Factor leader in some fashion and can replace that void. And so the business can carry on and he actually can leave. A lot of times with the kids that are not capable of running the business, and all that happens is dad gets dragged back into the business. He never gets what I call real retirement. Real retirement is where you sit in Spain. You know, a good entrepreneur will sit in Spain on the beach on holiday and wake up worrying about his business every day because his shares are in company's house, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Real retirement is when that burden is there. You can wake up in Spain and you don't even think about it. You're free because it's the shares are no longer. That's what people are really after is real retirement. And so you need a good new owner that can take that and make sure the business gets to its next level. Typically, if the kids were going to be the right people, we wouldn't even have been called.
True. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
It because that would have happened over years. And normally they're not, by the way. Kids are not automatically X Factor leaders like that.
Why should they be? Why should they be? Just because they're genetically related to you doesn't mean that they are the right people to lead companies.
I don't notice Mick Jagger's children being lead singers of any band. You know what I mean? It's
right.
Yeah. And so, yeah, no, it's exactly right. So that's the first instance. And it turns out if you take care of that and honor that we need to leave, and you take care of finding the right new owner for the business will in their heart love that business because it's the right, they're just feeling it. This is their destiny.
Well, they're not buying it on a balance sheet. They're buying it because they care about the business, like, the people, all of it, right?
I want to spend the hours and minutes of my day for the next several years
doing this.
And I really, this is the one.
Yeah.
You know, that energy is so powerful. So that's what we look for.
Yeah.
We had a viewing this morning with a big GP firm and a big, I can't name them, but a big hospital group you would recognize. And oh my God, the chemistry and the conquering the world and the perfection. And that's what you want. I will now go and negotiate commercial terms for that deal, and we will get the right terms for everybody because everybody wants it so much.
So how many? Well, walk us through. So when someone comes to you and says, "I want to sell my business," right?
Yeah.
Walk us through what you look at to see if it's even ready to go to market. What are the things that you're looking at?
So number one, you have to have. Remember, we're head and heart here. Okay,
Right.
so the M&A process at our level is more heart than head. It's more about people and things like that. But the head stuff matters.
Okay.
And so, at a head level, mathematically, you for most businesses, you are selling a future cash flow. So the way to visualize it is you have a cow, but you're not selling the cow. You're selling the future milk.
Okay. Good.
Okay.
Like the visual.
If you do an asset sale where you're selling the value of the balance sheet.
Yep.
You know, the fixed assets and the net working capital, that's the equivalent of it. And sometimes you do that with like a fish and chip shop or something where you sell the tables and chairs and the ovens and things like that. And that's the value of some
would be
of
that case or something.
because it's a property.
Right.
Yeah. And now a very lucrative hotel, they would be selling the future, but you do one or the other. So that's the equivalent of killing the cow and having steak dinner. Can't do both. And they're both.
You can't kill the cow and milk it for 5 years.
That's right. So it's mutually exclusive.
Right.
Yeah. You either do an asset valuation. This is valuation, or you do a cash. Now, most businesses we sell, you're selling the future cash flow. That's what you're selling, the ticket to achieve that future cash flow. And so due diligence becomes about, how confident am I that future cash flow is going to come in?
Right.
That's why recurring revenue and contracts and things like that make the cash flow more valuable because less risk.
Okay.
And everybody knows about multiples and things.
Yeah.
Multiples go up and down with risk.
Yeah.
So
I think that's really interesting because I've not heard many people talk about it the way you do when we've chatted or you've given feedback to members of F12 and stuff. I think your take on that is the risk of that revenue, isn't it? It's revenue risk. It's like if for example, if you're in a business and you've signed 5-year contracts with major PLCs, your revenue risk is low because it's locked in.
It's baked in. That's
baked in. It's really solid. Whereas if you're a business that sells, let's just say, right, I'm looking over there. Let's just say picture frames, and you sell one at a time. There's no recurring revenue model. There's nothing that's built in there. There's no membership. There's no nothing like that. And now you're constantly in the mode of having to hunt for the next sale. That revenue risk is high.
Correct.
So therefore multiple significantly lower.
Because you have high risk.
Right.
And the extremes would be on the highest risk revenue would be a contractor.
Okay.
For a house contractor.
Right.
And every time he's got to find a new house to do a contract.
Yeah, okay.
That's the most extreme. The other extreme, the least risky revenue is a SaaS provider of something like Xero software.
Yeah.
Once we all use Xero.
Ridiculously sticky, you're not going anywhere, right?
Right. Yeah. And so it doesn't even, contracts are nice. Contracts create cliffs though. And so the best revenue is like a Xero where you have repeating revenue that's extremely sticky. That's the highest quality.
So when you were evaluating somebody, they come to you.
Yeah.
The revenue risk is the first thing you look at?
No, it would be that there is, so if the math is the boring head stuff, if the math on evaluation is you're selling a future cash flow, we need to make sure there's a cash flow there to sell.
Okay.
Because and it may look like there's a cash flow. Say they're at 200,000 EBITDA, but the owner's been taking 12 grand a year in PAYE.
Right.
And so the replacement for him would be 80,000, and maybe he hasn't been paying the rent because he owns the building and whatever. And we end up with 100 grand of profit to sell. That's very difficult. There isn't a lot there.
Okay. So let's just unpack that for a second.
Yeah.
Because you did that very fast. And because I think it's a really important issue. So when you come to sell the business, if you are working in it right now, then when somebody buys it, if they're buying it as an investor, they're going to need to replace you to do that job. So even if let's just use different maths, but if you've been paying yourself 50,000, but the market rate for somebody doing your job as managing director or CEO of that business is closer to 80 to 100, say 100, then there's £50,000 that needs to be taken out of the profit of that business because that's what will be needed
to show the true profit of the business.
Show the true profit of the
that's right. And typically owners are paying themselves 12 grand.
And then the rest is dividends.
Right. And so it's not on the P&L.
Yeah.
So you have to do what's called a normalization adjustment to give them a normal, and that'll be a reduction from profit. Everybody knows about add backs. You add back what you call them.
I'm not sure everybody does know about add back. Because if you've not been through this process, I don't think you have a clue.
So you have your operating profit that's on your P&L, and then you have what I call your Hawaiian holidays and Ferraris that you put through the business.
Hawaiian holidays and Ferraris.
Yeah, things that are not necessary for the business to run, that are personal. People put entire building of extensions on houses and motorhomes and all that, which is fine. And it reduces tax, but we add it back in what's called a recast.
Right.
So what we're trying to do is show what would the cash flow for the new buyer be.
Right.
Is what the mission is. How much milk is he going to get out of that cow?
Okay, understood.
Yeah, and so you have add backs, and sometimes you have one-offs if they had a fire. Sometimes they tried a trade show in Germany they'll never do again that cost them 50 grand.
Right.
So you can add that back. It's not going to repeat, and it took from profit.
Right.
You then have negative add backs that are typically around the owner was taking dividends.
Right.
And you need to normalize the cost of his salary. That's the most common one. Sometimes they own the properties and so they're not paying rent. So those are the two big.
Yeah, I suppose owning the property. If the owner of the business put the property into pension fund or whatever,
right,
that just changes the the
if he hasn't been paying rent, if the new guy's going to have to pay rent, we need to. So we do something called a recast where we come up with that. So that recast number needs to be big enough that times a multiple. You end up with something that's worth selling. And at some point, if you don't have, enough cash flow, the business really just isn't worth that much. And that happens a lot.
Yeah.
Where you end up, when you do that whole exercise, the business has 50 or 100K in profit. And and you know, if one thing happened, you'd lose even that.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't. And also those kind of businesses, you know, you can't have investors. You need whoever buys it is buying a job as well.
Yeah.
So usually that's one of the first things. Is there a cash flow to sell? The second thing we look at, and you know, we like it to be 500,000 or more for
Right.
us. We get to, you know, we cost. And so if you're going to have a project with somebody like us,
But your model's different. I mean,
yeah.
one of the things I like about yours, your model is completely different to how the rest of the industry does it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And basically, Transworld's 250 offices have been around 40 years, and we've had a policy that whole time across all the offices, we don't do upfront fees. And
Yeah, so just to be clear, you don't charge somebody £25,000
No.
to list their business for sale on the promise that they will sell it easily, right? Which is what the rest of the industry does.
Right. And the reason I didn't understand it in the beginning, I get it now. If you also listen to our CEO, Andy Cagnetta in the US, he talks about Transworld being a community service. He encourages us to do charity. You know, we see this as a vocation. We're meeting people at a very vulnerable point in their life for something quite big.
Yeah.
It's not just about the money.
Most people are only doing it once, right?
That's right.
Most people are not doing it more than once. This is the only time they will go through this
That's right.
process.
Yeah, but they're vulnerable because they've never done it before.
Right.
And the money does matter. I don't mean to diminish the money. The reason we talk about getting their new buyer first is that we've reversed what M&A normally does. Typical M&A process is you focused on highest offer, auctions, all that kind of stuff. And you end up with a 75% failure rate from heads of terms to closing. You end up with 1 in 2 transactions, if they do close, not delivering after the fact. It's terrible statistics.
You just say 1 in 2 transactions.
Not delivering after the fact. And
what do you mean by that?
You had expectations of revenue and profit.
And it didn't deliver.
They didn't deliver. 50% don't make it. Now, this is not just for small business. We got these statistics. We took some courses at Imperial College, and our case studies were VW and Mercedes and things like this, and it failed. And he said, the instructor, a great instructor, said the number one reason is nobody evaluated. Like in VW Mercedes, they were in their whiteboards with their spreadsheets and conference rooms. Nobody evaluated the corporate cultures and how they'd fit together.
Yeah.
And when they put them together, it was oil and water. And we went, oh my God, that's just what happens with us. We're not focusing on having the right new owner, and we're focusing on head stuff.
You shifted.
Yeah, that's when about 5 years ago, and man, it made a difference. Now I know what I'm looking for. If I get the right new owner, the money works itself out usually. You do some financial qualifying, but because people will try harder.
Because
they want it.
There's a values fit.
They want, you know, when you really wanted that house that was over the budget, you found the money.
Yeah.
You know, it's, and that's the energy, but it's not just that. There's a 75% failure rate from heads of terms to closing in our sector.
I know when you said that the first time, I was absolutely gobsmacked. Like blown away.
It's huge.
So, because I think quite often entrepreneurs go, I'm coming to see you. I'm putting my business up for sale. I'm super excited. You go through all the, will it sell, won't it sell stuff, and we'll come back to that in a minute in terms of what stops it selling.
Yeah.
And then great news, somebody signs heads of terms, and off we go, and into the deal we go. And then to think that you've only got a 25% chance
1 in 4
at that point
in our industry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I get 75% of mine over the line.
Right, which is massive.
Well, because I only get paid when these things close. So for 7 years, I wake up every morning and think, how can I get these over the line? And when one fails, man, am I going to school on it? Because I don't have an upfront fee. Anyway, the reason Transworld doesn't allow upfront fees is because we're now aligned with our clients. It makes sure we're not in those initial listing meetings saying whatever the client wants to hear just to get 20 grand off of them.
Yeah.
Because that's not focused on doing.
I think that's a very different business model, right?
Totally.
So all the agents that are running around telling you they've got loads of buyers just waiting to buy your business, and
they just want your 20 grand.
Yeah, they just want your 20 grand.
Yeah.
They're not in the business of selling you.
And you typically will deal with salespeople.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have that. We by design, that's a very important thing that guy is doing, selling his business. He deserves to have the guy he sat in front of and trusted. And the one who's responsible. So that's how we roll.
And got the financial knowledge and information backing and experience, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. So he not a bait and switch. If you got the sales guy with fancy graphs.
Yep.
Anyway, the bigger firms,
which I hate, by the way, it drives me insane.
Well, the bigger firms in the UK that play that game sell between 6 and 8% of their businesses. You have a 92% chance of not selling. Now, the criminal thing about that isn't the 20 grand. It's that, remember who these people are. They're 60 years plus. Yeah. You've just wasted a year of their retirement knowing from day one that you weren't really going to do the job they were hiring you to do. That's the problem.
That's a great
perspective. Yeah, and it's not fair.
Yeah.
And that's why I wrote the book originally, was to say at least let's educate people to give them a chance against these advisors. And so this is what happens, but we don't have that. And so I'm thinking, if I take this project on, am I willing to put in 200 hours at my risk? And
that's a really good. So it's about 200 hours of investment for you without any guarantee of income unless it sells, right?
Yeah.
So you really are heavily invested.
Yeah. Yeah. So you got to choose wisely.
Yeah.
And you play to win.
Yeah.
The idea of taking on a bunch of them and hoping one closes doesn't work.
No.
You'll close nothing. And if you do that,
so what can somebody do? What can a founder or an owner do? Sort of 12 to 24 months before they want to sell. So what can they do if they're sat listening to this and they're thinking, do you know what? I'm kind of probably I'm going to be done in a year or 2
or maybe 3 years. Yeah.
Like, what can they start doing now that when they come to you, you're going to go, great that you did that, rather than, oh, you need to go back and do that? What are some of the things that they should be looking at?
So there's 5 or 6 what we call value drivers, and they're all in my book.
Great.
Number one,
we'll link to the book below, by the way, for those who want to grab a copy, and we'll do that below so you can get hold of that.
The number one value driver is mathematically is always get your profit up,
right?
Because there is going to be math, and you can't escape that.
Yeah.
So there is going to be multiple. There is going to be, and multiples are crude. If you've taken business valuation courses, what you're really doing is projecting a cash flow into the future using an expected rate of return called a discount rate and doing a net present value calculation.
Right.
That's the right way to do business valuation. But the multiples are a proxy for that, a crude proxy.
Okay.
But we all use them, so you're stuck with it. And there is no exact science on multiples and on what they are, but what we do have is market data about what things sold for. Yeah. So that's why I'm saying a 3 or 4 multiple under $1 million. That's what the data says. You hit $1 million, you start getting 4s and 5s and 6s. Anyway, value drivers. So that's the first one. The second thing is key man issues. The second biggest issue we have that if you're so critical to the business, if you leave, for example, the customers love you, employees love you, you're the guy designing all the new projects, whatever it is. How do you think of business like a sausage machine, and the sausage is profit, right? And someone's buying the future sausage, right? We talked about, but if you're a giant gear in that machine and we take you out, the sausage machine doesn't function, or it functions very poorly. Yeah. That's not going to work. So you've really, really got to get away from the key, the key man as much as you can. It's
not a point of failure, right? So it definitely, if there's one, I mean, it can be the owner, but it could also be other people too. But if
they're probably staying though.
Right.
Remember, it's the guy that's leaving is the problem.
True.
Because he's going to go hit the beach. And if the business doesn't work the same, but remember, leadership is okay. The new owner has to provide leadership. We really, at the level of small businesses, don't have investor buyers. Right. Even the private equity guys get really involved. They're very active boards, and remember, they're putting a non-exec chairman and a CFO, so their team isn't just passive. So this idea that you buy a company and it just runs because you're a quote unquote investor really is not a thing at our level. No, not often.
I would agree.
And you got to have some way of being active in leadership, not management. Yep. Management can work just fine. So anyway, but it's dealing with that and making sure that you can leave. And I, by the way, on this point, I am the healthy deal normally, I tell people, is that the owner is out in 6 months.
Right.
The reason for this is this idea that people stay in for years and things for earnouts.
Yep. Which is interesting, by the way, because I was talking to somebody a couple of days ago and they said, oh, I've kind of mentally got to come to terms with the fact that I'm going to need to stay in this for 2 to 3 years. And I mean, you're never going to last working for someone else for 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. Why do entrepreneurs become entrepreneurs? For freedom?
Yes.
And so suddenly you don't have freedom anymore, and someone's telling you what to do with what was your baby, and you're doing the same job you were doing, and the profits are going in someone else's pocket. Yep. I call that a prison. And that's exactly what happens 90% of the time.
Yeah.
And so why do people come to me? People come to me so they can leave. So we need to honor the mission. which is they need to be able to leave within 6 months. If they can't, we have the wrong buyer. Simple.
It's a great.
It's that simple.
I love that frame because I think there's a limiting belief running around that if I'm going to sell my business, I'm going to need to stay in it for 2 years, 3 years. And I think that's such a great insight. What that tells you is that you didn't get the right buyer then.
Or stay in your business for 2 or 3 years, take all the profit, do what you need to do so that you can leave in 6 months once the buyer comes along.
Right.
One or the other. But don't engineer yourself in there for 2 or 3 years. Why? That means the buyer's not coming in, and what value are they adding?
Yeah.
And they're going to take all your profit, and they're probably going to want, but now 10% of the time, what you get is a beam up to mothership scenario where someone's developed a company as far as they can. And by being acquired by another company, that whatever they have can be highly leveraged to that company's channels, or software is very common this way.
Right.
And generally they're younger people. And that's fine. So that's 10%. But 90%, when someone's over 60 and wants to retire, the whole exercise is to leave. And this idea of staying behind means we have the wrong.
Why would you want to stay at that point in your life anyway?
No. So, but anyway, so that's the second one, is key man. Third one that gets us is customer concentration. And this is a big one.
So just unpack this.
Customer concentration is where you have too much revenue with 1 or 2 customers.
Okay.
And it goes like this: under 10%, green light; 10 to 25%, yellow for any one customer; over 25%, red.
Really?
Big problem.
Really?
And so this is because remember the quality of, by the way, it's called quality of earnings, QOV.
Okay.
When we talk about how confident am I that milk is going to come in from the cow, right? The recurring revenue.
Yep.
This is an aspect of QOV.
You grow up anywhere near a farm, or it's just like random.
I actually grew up on a horse ranch, but anyway, we didn't have cows. So basically so now I'm relying on that future revenue stream, and the risk becomes how confident am I on that? Well, we just talked about a minute ago, my confidence goes up the more recurring it is.
Right.
Like the SaaS model was 0, and stuff like that. Well, another aspect to that is if I have all my eggs in one basket, if that customer suddenly decides to go, I had a private equity deal with Lloyd's private equity, 18 million. We'd worked a year and a half on it. We were 2 weeks away from signing. And their biggest customer, which is Screwfix, went out for tender. It was 25% of the revenue. The whole deal tanked. And, because it was just too much of it. Now, they end up winning the tender, but the whole thing had tanked.
Risk profile.
Yeah. If they'd been 10%, they would have survived it.
Right.
So you really want to diversify your customer base. So all I'm saying is the customer concentration risk is very real in manifestation. I've watched it happen time and time again where, oh no, we'll never lose that customer and blah, 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 blah. And the next week something happens and that customer's gone.
But all you find out that actually, I've seen this where I've looked at clients' revenue and that didn't go, no, there's a customer here that's 25% of your revenue. Like, are they on contract or something? Oh, no. We just have a really good relationship with them. Okay. Is there any agreements written down? No. So you've got a handshake agreement with somebody, but if that person got sick or died or something happened, have you got anything structural?
Well, that's a different issue. That can be okay. Because you can have written down contracts fully signed and all that, but somebody's 50% of your revenue, but contracts can be canceled.
Yeah, true.
They got good lawyers, find a way out of it.
Yeah.
You can have another client where it's just, there are no contracts, but they've been buying from you a service. A good example is IT support companies.
Right.
I've been supporting that guy for 10 years. He's not going anywhere. And you have 30 of those.
Yeah.
People have confidence in that. It's what we call repeating revenue. So sometimes it's not about contracts, it's how repeating it is. You got to really take a view. A lot of this is very artistic.
So there's a difference between repeating revenue and recurring revenue.
Yeah, recurring revenue. Repeating revenue is the same guys are buying over and over and over. Recurring revenue we tend to use that. Things like, one of the best also is like alarm companies.
Yeah.
They have you on a subscription for your alarm. You can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Unless you replace that alarm.
Yeah. Telephone companies the same.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah. So, but repeating revenue is good. Going over contracts, to contrast that, are actually lower down the totem pole than those two.
Really?
Because they have cliffs. And it's private equity guy taught me this.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I have we have a water dispenser in our house. Okay. And my wife complains about it all the time. And I know it's going to be there in 2 or 3 years. But I guarantee you, if we were on a contract and I had to re-sign a contract
Right.
where they had a thing where you
break clause, really,
or even where they forced you to sign a new. Well, your 2 years is up. Now we need you to sign a new contract.
Yeah.
I would get rid of them.
Yeah.
Because that will give you the opportunity. But that will now never happen because there's just goes on and on and on and on. And so contracts create cliffs where repeating revenue is perpetual and indefinite.
Okay.
And so
revenue concentration.
So
customer concentration.
Customer concentration is an issue. The next one can be supplier concentration. I had a medical supplies company, but 80% of the revenue was from one supplier in Turkey.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. So if that supplier turns you off or finds somebody else to distribute their products in the UK.
Well, that just happened, didn't it, with the tariffs and stuff in China? And
yeah, exactly.
That caused all kinds of problem for people whose single source of supply was China, and suddenly, like, massive issues.
So what we're doing is we're going around the different parts of the business to assess risk. So what you want to do is have your supply chain diversified. So if one supplier has a problem, you've got an easy backup. Now, some businesses, this isn't relevant. Some it's hugely relevant.
Yeah.
For a lot of businesses. I mean, those are the big ones. And the other one is you got to make sure your books and records are solid. If you're on an airplane, you want to be able to trust the altimeter and the
the quality of the data.
Yeah, the data
really
has to be.
important.
Yeah, you got to know if you're going to show people data that says this is how profitable this is, they have to be able to rely on the reports they're looking at. And sometimes it's not easy as it sounds. You get anybody that's doing project work, you have work in progress.
Yeah.
Notoriously hard to nail down. And if the systems aren't good to calculate that, you can have huge swings in profit for work in progress.
I mean, we worked on a deal, didn't we, that eventually didn't happen, but we worked.
Yeah, exactly. That one.
It was like a year. I think it was a year of bringing in a highly skilled, highly qualified CFO to just try and sort out the mess of the data that they had after 20 years.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't well structured. It wasn't well. It was fine. If it was fine in terms of reporting for tax, VAT and corporation tax and all that, but very different level of depth of data needed if someone's going to give you 2, 3, 4, 5 million for it, right?
Yeah. Oh, totally. Because they're relying on that, and they're handing over lots of pound coins. Yeah. Because remember, they're handing over a multiple of the profit that's being calculated. Yeah. In pound coins, and so it's anyway. No, so we call it good books and records is the tagline.
Right.
It is totally necessary. Those are kind of the main ones. If you can.
How important is the team?
It's very important. But I haven't seen many companies that don't have a decent team that are making money. Yeah, it's a good question. Sorry if I'm hesitating because it's a multifaceted, nuanced question. So what makes a good new owner? And one of the things I look for, like I had this morning in the viewing I talked about, is vibe.
Right.
That their chemistry, their vibe, their focus, their value systems align.
Yeah.
So that when they step in, it's going to feel like they're home.
Yeah.
And typically we find our owners mirror the vibe and the value systems and all that of the team.
Yeah.
And so the team is super important, but they're proxied by the owner. But before the deal can go through, the new buyer has to make sure that they're going to be able to work with this team in the right way and all that kind of stuff. So the team is very important, but even more important is the vibe of the new owner with the team.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because you can have the.
So here's an interesting question. Sorry, just on this, because like I've had a couple of clients who didn't want the team to know the business was up for sale.
We never want them to know.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The advice is because they get scared.
Right.
And then they start doing silly things like looking for jobs and tell everybody else. And so the advice is we keep it all very secret. So typically you're relying on, and generally you'll get there's generally one or two key people that are going to be running the business with the new owner. Typically at some point you bring them into the process, but nobody else.
But nobody else.
So it's very hard to assess the team because of that in a way, but you do it by asking a lot of questions and stuff. But you can assess vibe from if an owner's very involved with the business, they mirror.
But don't you look at stuff like, contracts of employment, all of that kind of stuff to make sure everything's nailed
And
down?
due diligence,
due
you do.
diligence.
Yeah,
you
of
do all
course.
that anyway.
Yeah, that's all part. There's a
But
whole
then
DD
there are
process.
things you can get sorted before you rock up to that. Like, the last thing you want to do is go into due diligence and someone starts going, well, you haven't got good employment contracts. You haven't got, good T's and C's on your commercial contracts. All of that stuff you can clean up long before you get to
You
that
can.
point, right?
You can. Most people don't.
No.
Yeah, and most people decide they need to sell. It's like a house. There's loads you can do to make the house more valuable, but it's just, that's not real life. Real life is we decide we need to move, and it is what it is, And so, in an ideal world, Paul, absolutely, and they should go and clean up the environment. That's what exit planning is for.
Right.
Is you have a lead up. You have time to go. Do the landscaping, you have time to paint the house, you have time to add that extension that's going to add more value.
Yeah.
If you have all that time, great. A lot of times life isn't like that because maybe one of the owners gets an illness. Maybe,
I mean, I think realistically, I think you can do most of that preparation work in 6 to 9 months.
Right.
Right. In my experience with clients who've come to me and said, I've either got to close this business or I'm going to sell it because it's stressing me out too much.
Yeah.
I've said, look, give us 9 months, 3 quarters of working through, looking at, the cash, the strategy, the cash, the systems, the cash and the people. Give us a quarter on each one of those and we'll have this thing in tip-top shape.
Sounds great.
To be exit ready, right? Like I know that if we work on those 3 things for 9 months, we'll have this business, probably in the state that you're going to look at me and go, hang on a minute, I'm not sure I want to sell it now. Possibly. That's happened at least twice.
Yeah.
And the other side of things is if you do sell it, you're going to get a significantly higher multiple at that point because it's got the systems, it's got the team, it's got the, it's got the customers, it's got everything you just talked about, we've addressed.
Yeah.
And therefore, when someone else comes in and looks at it, they go, this is a good proposition. Because the other thing people forget is that you're not the only business people are looking at.
That's right.
Right? They are looking at other businesses and comparing and contrasting yours versus what else is on the market. In the same way that you would with a house or a car, you're going to look at other things. So it's like, look, surely you want your business to look the most attractive it possibly can when it goes to the market, right?
I couldn't agree more. And how many people have I sent to you for this very reason?
Yeah.
And why do you think we created the Business Exit Academy?
Yeah.
We're not going to do it because I have a day job where I actually sell these things. But no, absolutely agree. And if people will do it, that's great. If they will put the effort in. But a lot of times,
well, they're just done physically, emotionally.
They're 60 years old. The company's been running how it is for 10 years. If you,
let me talk to you about. I just want to ask a question about selling if you're younger, right?
Yeah.
Because you and I have had this conversation. I can't remember when, but it might have been a retreat over a drink in a pool or something. But where you said something really interesting to me that's always kind of stuck with me, which is you said it's much harder for a 40-year-old to sell their business than a 60-year-old.
Yeah.
Can you just explain why that is?
Yeah, because what happens is, remember, the entrepreneur becomes an entrepreneur for freedom,
right?
And so what happens to the younger guy, and we've lived through this and many times, so it's not just philosophical, but the younger guy and a well-performing business is a wonderful thing to behold. You've really beaten the statistics. If you're making $500,000 even a year, running your own business and you're 40 years old, my God, you shouldn't have you shouldn't have
in the top 5%,
even that better, right? And you shouldn't have an idea that you can just go do that again.
Yeah,
because you've beaten the statistics. You're lucky if 1 in 10 make it, or something worse than that.
Yeah.
So if you've got a good cash flowing business, you're better off if you're 40 years old going to you and understanding how to get yourself out of boxes so you can get some freedom back. But what happens is people don't do that.
No.
And they don't feel free anymore. They have VAT reports and HR issues and financials, and the bigger they get.
Yeah.
And suddenly they say, I've lost my freedom. I know the solution. I'll just sell this business. Fine. They come to us. We run a project. We find an owner, a good new owner. In the process of that, they have lots of discussions about all the things a business could do and how great it is, whatever, and they start falling back in love with their business. And then what happens in every transaction, remember the 75% failure rate?
Yeah.
Okay, M&A is hard to get over the line there's what I call oh shit moments, and there's oh shit. I counsel my clients in the beginning. We're going to have oh shit moments, and here's what we're going to do when they happen. Like talking about turbulence before the plane takes off. And I had one the other day. I had one the other day, and the guy goes, "Ken, you're not going to believe this. Oh shit!" I go, "You even used the words. Do you remember this discussion?"
Yeah.
Now, what was the instruction? We're going to calm down and work through this. Exactly. Every deal has them.
I see something similar, which I say to people. People, listen, there's going to come a point in this process when you're going to want to quit the scale up process. You're going to want to quit it.
Yeah.
And I said, at that point, you have to, you'll ring me up and say, I'm done with this. I don't want to do any more, Paul. I'm out. I don't want to do any more coaching, or I don't want to, I'm done. I don't want to be in the mastermind, whatever. And I said, what you got to realize is, that's your emotional brain telling you that this has just got hard, or there's a level of uncertainty you're not comfortable with. And secondly, trust the process. Like I've been doing this for 21 years. This is part of the process. This volatility at times is part of the process. And people kind of go, oh, is it? It's normal. I'm normal. There's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you at all. It's completely normal. And I think that if you can normalize it for people, like turbulence is normal on a plane, right? On a flight, it's normal, right?
Selling a business, especially at the end, is very emotional. But however, you combine that with the fact that they, at some point, their accountant to them does some math and they're getting a 4 multiple, let's say, and they go, well, Ken, if I just kept this business for 4 more years, I'm only 40, I could make the same amount of money. And I'd have a whole business to sell, even if it hadn't grown, I could double my money keeping it for 4 years. And I will always look at them and say, your math is flawless. You're absolutely right. Well, I should do that then, because what else are they going to do?
Yeah.
So unless a young person is moving country or has another business, like some mechanical structural reason.
Yeah.
Generally, our experiences is they like the idea of the whole sale process, but when it comes to it, and things get hard, and they eventually do the math, and they've gotten all excited about their business because they've been talking it up so much. You add all that together, and they pull out. And we've wasted our time, and we've all had that. We all talk about this, and so we call it the young man syndrome. And it's fine, and there are exceptions to that, but that in fact there's a lot of exceptions to that, but that in general is what happens.
So you just dropped in something which I know you've written a book to deal or to try and sort of address this issue. So I'm going to ask this question in a way that I think it's a little controversial, but I think you'll get where I'm going. Like, how do accountants mess up deals for clients?
Oh no, it's a good question. I have 3 right now, and I'm going to answer directly. I wrote a whole book called For Practice Accountants.
Yeah, I know.
That's the way I dealt with my frustration. It is not or we call them compliance accountants. So the guys that do your annual returns and things like that. It is not because in large they're incompetent at all. They're all good guys. That's it. Right. I want to start there. The issue is they. You ask most of the ones we work with, how many M&A transactions were you involved with in the last year? They'll normally tell you like 1 or 2, and they're generally on a fringe, where they're doing data.
So it's not they don't have
not their skill.
They don't have the data set either, or the experience.
They don't have the experience. So that's point 1.
Right.
Point 2, almost none of them have business valuation training.
Yep.
Now, I was a chartered accountant. I have the accounting training and I have business valuation training.
What's the difference between the two?
Massively.
Okay,
and I can tell you very simply. And I didn't realize it until I'd done my valuation training. Accounting training is backward looking. Think of it.
Okay.
What does an accountant do?
Look at last year's numbers.
Everything they do is about in the past.
Yeah.
Valuation is about what is the future cash flow going to be. That's how mathematically how evaluation works. Right. So when the penny dropped for me is in one of my valuation courses, the instructor said, valuation is 60% science, 40% art. And I went, you don't say art and accounting in the same sentence, right? And now, when I've done it, now I get it because, what multiple is it? Because you're doing a forecast and there's so many things.
Right.
And so it's a different way of looking at the world. And so, and understanding how and then you have to weave that into the human experience. So the other issue accountants have by and large, and I've had this happen twice this week, is their world is numbers and cash flows and spreadsheets and things like that. So when they advise their clients, all they see in a business is a perpetual cash flow forever.
Yeah.
And they don't understand why anybody would give up what is a cash machine.
Yeah.
They can't, it doesn't mathematically make sense to them because they're not geared to look at the human condition
Yep.
and think back to point one, why does my client need to sell? Because he needs to leave.
Yes.
They don't vibe into this
No.
because it's not their world. They don't understand. He's selling so he can have real retirement,
Yep.
sitting on the beach,
Yep.
and have a new guy come in and take over so he can really leave. Yeah. And your 70-year-old client holding on to this, doing what you're suggesting. I had the guy this week said, "Oh, the kid can run it." The kid's in the business. It's a sawmill, and he's in the sawmill in jeans sawing wood. He's never dealt with customers. He's never dealt with finances. He's never
I love
dealt
that
with
when accountants throw out lines like one of your children could run it.
Yeah.
Like without any awareness, comprehension, or understanding whether they've A, got the passion for it, B, got
all
the
that.
skills for it, like any of that. No,
It's all mechanical.
Yeah.
Because then you could have this perpetual cash flow. And so generally we find, so I always give my clients, I have these sets of talks I do. You remember I have the oh shit moment one. I have the accountant talk saying, your accountant's a very important team member in M&A. We don't want to dismiss them. I'm not doing that. They're very important. Most of them are very competent. And most of them are doing this from a point of caring.
Yes.
I think it's disingenuous when people say, oh, the accountant's doing this because he wants to keep the account and all that. Not my experience. They're all coming from a good place. So let's get rid of all the negativity. But what will happen with but I say I always remind my clients, you're the boss. This is your life, your journey. We are just advisors, and you have to take each of us with a grain of salt.
Right.
And the accountant, 89, 90% of the time is going to hate an M&A transaction because it's just their view of the world, and that's okay.
Right.
Okay. You need to listen to him, and you need to process his advice from his lens, because sometimes they'll have very important things to say. He'll be the one making sure that we get the right numbers. He'll be the one giving good tax advice and all that kind of stuff. But don't expect him to love this because he's seeing a perpetual cash flow go away and other reasons. And he'll have ideas about valuation because he cares about you. Yeah. And he wants you to get the most and all that.
Most people don't change their accountants, right?
Yeah.
Unless something horrific happens, most people don't change their accountants.
Yeah.
So quite often, if you run a business for 20 years, chances are you've had the same accountant for at least the last 10.
That's right.
At least. So you've grown up with them. They've grown up with you. They've seen your kids. There's a different level of connection with them than they have with almost anybody else.
Yeah, that's right. But that's why I wrote the book for practice accountants, that I can hand them and say, explains, here's what we're doing. Yeah. We are not doing an exercise that in the first instances is just ruthlessly mathematical on pound coins. Right. It is the human condition massively weaved into it. Set one. Two, here's how business valuation really works, because you guys haven't had any training in it. It's just true. Yeah. None of you have the certificates on the wall. You take a training, you do an exam. You're in a profession that thrives on that, right? Of continuous education. Yeah. None of you have done it yet. You're more than willing to have lots of opinions about it. And the other thing that happens with accountants is, because they don't do M&A, they don't really get involved in the working capital discussions, which are a huge part of understanding how much excess cash comes out of a business. Because, the owner's always got stored profit in a business. Yes. Not always, but almost always. And it's how much we can extract, because you need to leave enough working capital.
But don't you think that's interesting? Because I've seen people miscalculate how much working capital they need to leave in the business. Yeah. And 6 months later, the business is in trouble.
That's right.
Because the person selling it took all the working capital out because they were advised really badly, and they took out too much cash on day one.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So you need to get the working capital right. And basically the business should be able to function without needing more cash injected for the next 12 months. Right. And there's a whole discussion around that.
That's a good point. I want to draw everyone's attention to that, because I think it's such an important point. The business should be able to function for at least 12 months without another injection of cash.
Correct.
Right. That's
unless you're doing something capital.
Unless you're doing something special. But realistically, that's the metric you should put out.
Exactly. And so that's the easy way of understanding it. Everybody will agree to that. Right. Now the math is where the contentious is. And so you have to do the math. And, when you bring work in progress into this, and generally what you're doing is you're taking if you have 12 balance sheets, you're taking an average of the last 12 working capital balances, non-cash working capital balances. That becomes the number. And then we do this thing called an equity bridge and stuff like that. But it's generally a bit of an argument, and that's okay. And, but you have to have the knowledge to have the argument. And a lot of the accountants don't have training in this. And so we end up with deals stalling big time for weeks, getting stuck.
Well, by you educating the accountant, because you have to educate the accountant, or
Well, yeah, because but the accountants, you get the accountants together to try and have a discussion about this, and they don't have the backgrounds and to come up with a conclusion.
Right.
So now if it's my transactions, I intervene and I manage the conversation.
Right.
But generally, there's a lot of education.
That's a lot of skill from your side to do that.
Yeah.
You're managing multiple relationships and, multiple egos and all the other things that go with it.
Well, and every pound coin is a pound coin out of my client's pocket.
Right.
So they're very concerned about it. The buyer's very concerned they're not going to have enough money to run the company. So everybody's on high emotions on this conversation.
Right.
So we have to be, we have to tread carefully. And it's complex. There's a lot of moving parts in working capital.
Do you think you have your skill set around is more as much around managing that EQ piece, that human relation piece, that human conversation piece? It's as much about that as it is about the math element of it. And
it's a great question. I would say, we always talk about M&A at this level being 80% heart, 20% head.
Right.
And so it's mostly about people, but the head stuff. Do you know if you're going on holiday to Spain, it's mostly about heart, right? Yeah, holiday, da-da-da-da-da. But if you don't get the right flights and you're not on time for the flights and make the hotel reservations, it doesn't work, does it? So it's when we say a head stuff is only 20 or 30%, it doesn't mean it doesn't matter. It does matter a lot. And so it'd be very difficult to do this job. That's why this is such a hard job, is you have to have all these skill sets because they come up. You never know when you're in a conversation and stuff about math and accounting and all that comes up. And
so what causes deals to fall over in due diligence then?
Good question. Number one big one. We thought we had a certain cash flow based on the recast analysis.
Right.
And this goes on for months, right? By the time we do packaging and now we're 6 months later.
It takes time, right? People underestimate. I think people massively underestimate how long it takes to sell the business.
Well, I always say, our real job is we have, in the first instance, we're a dating agent. We're trying to find that right new owner. We do Transworld in the UK does 5,000 reach outs a week. We have AI, we have a whole team that does it. You're just like Match.com. Yeah. And then we use all of our networks, just trying to find the one that has the right timing. That can take months. But when you find them, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, wow, there she is. And then our second job is project managing a wedding because you have two sides, natural tensions, beta prenuptials.
Nice.
Yeah. And so I have 4 months of, that's where I spend most of my day.
Right.
To avoiding that 75% failure. I get about 75% of mine over the line.
Which is incredible.
Yeah. Well, you learn reason why. This is why it's so relevant. Anyway, number one reason why things fall over in for due diligence reasons.
Yeah.
Is because in that time that we did the packaging to now might have been 6 months and the company is tanked.
Right.
And so what happens when the plane starts going down is no one knows where down ends.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. And so if it's only gone down a little, but if it's gone down a lot, people lose confidence because what's happening is now they don't have confidence in the future cash flow.
Yeah.
Well, they're basing how they're going to pay for that purchase price on that future cash flow. They may have debt, they may have investors, they may have whatever. And if that future cash flow is going to be less than their modeling, they're screwed.
Yeah.
And so now, and if it's going down a lot, they're like, we can't model this anymore. So that's one reason. Another reason,
just on that point, this is why I say to every client that I'm working with coaching or is in one of our programs is that we want to build you a really robust and resilient sales engine, right? Sales team.
Yeah.
Whether it's sales team, sales process, whatever, that doesn't rely on them. That's critical because obviously the distraction cost of selling your business is huge. It takes your attention, doesn't it? It becomes like a full-time thing.
Towards the end,
right. So if you're the person responsible for driving sales and we take you out of that role to sell the business, then you end up with exactly that. And you only have to have one quarter where the numbers tank.
Right.
And it's a problem. So I say, look, the most important thing if you're going to sell your business, there are many, but one of the really key things you want to do is make sure that we've got a really good sales leader in the team who's leading the sales without you, so that the sales are still growing and staying on track with what you've promised the buyer they're going to be, even if you're sucked into everything to do with negotiating.
It has to be.
The number of people who resist that is really
Paul.
Absolutely. I don't know if I can afford to hire this person. There's 60,000 or 70,000. I'm like, it's an insurance policy against that deal falling over in due diligence. That's basically how I view it.
Well, and also, Paul, if he's that critical, remember when the deal closes, he's out in 6 months.
Right.
you better have somebody there to replace what he's
it,
doing anyway. Yeah, no, now ironically, another reason I've had deals fall over is because that the from signing heads of terms to when we close. Well, and it's since we did the information memorandum, that 6-month period,
Right.
the sales go up too much. And that also creates an issue because
Okay, I hadn't thought about it that way. What?
Yeah.
The issue why?
Because the seller wants more money.
More money.
And I've had very large deals with private equity fall over. And what happens is what people get, there's like a greed gene that kicks in. And I had one deal where the guy was perfectly happy with 12 million. I got him 15 and he was over the moon. And then we did the due diligence and suddenly it came up to where the multiple we used would be a little bit higher, would have him at 18. And he would not sell with 18 and they were ripping him off and da-da-da-da. And it's weird. And this happens. And so he ended up with nothing. And
there's a strategy I use with clients of mine who've said, look, I'm bringing you in because I want to sell in the next 2 to 3 years and I want to get it. I want to grow the business. I want to get it looking really great. And I want to get the right team and the right processes, the right profits so that we can, sell, right? That they've got that intention, right? They're really strategic about it. And I would say, listen, right, do me a favor, write down the number you would be happy to accept today if someone rocked up with a checkbook and a bank balance that it would clear. Write down the number that if they gave you, you'd be really happy with. Don't tell me, don't need to know. Write it down, put it in an envelope, seal the envelope, date it, and stick it in a drawer.
Yeah.
I said, preferably one where you know where it is, right? Or a safe. And I said, when we get to the end of this journey and somebody rocks up and offers you money, we're going to open that envelope. If the money they offer you is more than what you wrote down in that envelope, then we should take the deal. Because otherwise people go, oh, yeah, but I could get more.
And it goes on endlessly.
I saw a company lose I think it was a £25 million offer because they thought the two directors, I wasn't working with them, but I know this story, very reliable source, but they thought they should get 30. And the deal tanked, and then the business tanked, and 2 years later, the business.
So many stories like that.
Right. 2 years later, the business was in serious trouble, and like the valuation was like nothing. And you're like, what? You were haggling over 5 million when you were going to get 25. What would you each have done with the extra 2.5? Yeah, like how would your life have been different?
No, people, and it gets crazy, and people get like that, and they hang on these multiples, and I'm like, this is art. This is gray area.
That point multiples you said earlier with crude. 60%
like,
numbers, 40% art is really important.
Yeah, it's like there isn't some ledger in the sky where this is the accurate multiple. It's all just made up. And if you've got enough money coming out of this, more importantly, if you like the new owner and he's going to be able to take your baby, that's what you should do. Do you see how our whole rhetoric is getting people off of this? Now, once we're in the deal, I also have a secondary job. My job is to put as many pound coins in my client's pocket as we can.
Right.
But notice I'm bringing that in as a third objective, because once we're in a due diligence thing, but not at the expense of the buyer.
Right.
Now I walk right up to a line, because the minute I cross over that line, the buyer will feel unfairly dealt with.
Got it.
And we're likely to become statistics of failing.
Right.
Right. But there's a lot of gray area in terms of payment terms, working capital, a lot of stuff with tax, whatever. So we're super diligent on all the moving parts. This is where a lot of my job becomes very technically, very technical and numbersy and all this kind of stuff. And it's only us that pays attention to this.
Okay.
And the bigger picture on this, the accountants have a piece, the finance guys have a piece. So
let's just talk about something that is kind of, I'm sitting here listening to you and I'm going, okay, there's something bothering me here for a minute. And it's not you, but it's something that's going on in the industry, which is there seems to be a proliferation of people now doing deferred consideration deals.
Yeah.
Where you don't get your money for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And what's your take on that?
Oh, we have
good for the seller? Or?
Yeah. No, it's fine. We have but let's define what we mean.
Right.
Okay. So I normally work on what I call a core enterprise value.
Okay.
And that core enterprise value would be paid with a combination of closing payment, the cash from the seller, and some sort of debt instrument.
Okay.
So the bottom line, it's guaranteed to be paid. So for example, if you had a business that was 600,000 EBITDA and it was a 4 multiple, that'd be 2.4 million.
Right.
They might rock up with 1.5 million in cash and we have 900,000. in deferred over 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
And that cash flows. But you got to remember the way I use deferred and debt both start with a D is the way to remember it. That it's debt.
Right.
And because people get very confused over that in earnout.
Right.
So think of a wedding cake. So the bottom part of the stack up.
Yeah.
Part of the cake is closing payment.
Okay.
The second part of the cake is deferred payment.
Okay.
These two represent the core enterprise value.
Okay.
Now, then what happens is they say, well, yeah, but I know our EBITDA is, what did I say, 600,000, but we just signed this big contract. It's going to add another 300,000 of EBITDA. It's not fair. We can't prove it. We can't demonstrate that, but it is coming. Well, great. So if that money comes in, you can have 75% of the profit the first year, 50% the third year, 25%. That's the third tier of the wedding cake. That's an earnout. It's contingent.
And just for clarity, because whenever I've done talks and I've used EBITDA, not everybody understands what it means. So just from your perspective, what does that mean when you use it?
It's just basically the operating profit.
Right.
And with depreciation and amortization and interest taken out. EBITDA is the wrong number. This is Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett and all that. EBITDA is the wrong number. It's always wrong. You have to use adjusted EBITDA. And the adjusted EBITDA is when we actually do the add backs and all that.
Right.
EBITDA is a useless number without that. Completely useless. One of the big reasons is a lot of our clients make huge pension contributions.
Right. Yeah.
So you have to add those back. Forgot to mention that. Yeah. And so if you don't adjust EBITDA, you really have nothing. Yeah. But it's adjusted. And
just go back because the wedding cake. I've not heard you. I love the fact that people come in here and tell me things. I've known them for years, and they don't. I've never heard you. You may have said it somewhere else, but I've never remembered it. You've never told me the wedding cake analogy piece, and I think that's a brilliant.
There's more stacks on it, by the way.
Okay, what else?
So it's got a lot of layers.
You need to do an infographic. So you have this for social, mate, because it's brilliant. It's
you have
good.
You have the closing payment is the bottom of the cake.
Okay.
The next layer of the cake is the deferred. Those two are the core enterprise value.
Okay.
Deferred and debt start with a D.
Okay.
You're guaranteed that.
Yeah.
Even though the deferred might be paid over time.
Okay.
And there's nuances to that, but we can go into if you want. The next layer up is earnout.
Okay.
The contingent.
Right.
That generally you're saying we did the core enterprise value on provable EBITDA, but you're saying EBITDA is higher. If it is, and more money's coming in than I expect, sure, you can have some of it. The buyer's saying. Next layer on the cake is any rolled equity. There's occasions where the seller's doing something really exciting. The buyer's doing something really exciting with the company and is going to probably flip it in 5 years, and you can triple your money, and so you want a piece of that. So you trade some of your payment or the value of the company for equity.
Okay.
Another layer on the cake is they will probably, if you're going to stay in for 6 months, they'll pay you. So there's fees.
Yeah.
And we normally like to do a daily rate, by the way. It's a little trick.
Okay.
Rather than a salary. 6 months, right? You would think we'll do 6 months of a salary.
Right.
No, we do a day rate and a half day rate. Because that allows both parties to wind out the seller if it's natural.
Right.
And if it's not natural, the seller makes it an above average rate because it's a day rate.
Right.
But it gives flexibility instead of, we paid you for a month, might as well have you come in even though it's not working. So, so things like that. So that's a deal structure.
That's
so
great. That's you definitely need to create an infographic of that and put that out, because I've not heard you say it like that. At all.
I use that all the time.
Yeah, but I've never heard. I mean, like I'm sure you say it, but I've just
when you sell your company, then I would be telling you that, and that's in our normal
deal.
But that one works. Yeah, really well.
So what are 2 or 3? Like, give me 2 or 3 of the biggest landmines that like we said, like the people sort of should just walk away with from this conversation thinking about, what are 2 of the 2 or 3 things you want them to remember the most? Because you've dropped a lot of nuggets here that have been brilliant. What are 2 or 3 of the things that you really want them to remember?
The number one is M&A should be, the focus of M&A should be people where the switch in the heart has gone off and it's time to leave.
Right.
And then you should realize that the main mission is to find the right new owner for the business that gets you the financial that you need.
Yeah.
We're not diminishing that. We're just saying do it in a different order.
Yeah.
And there's lots of things we do in life like that where we're not diminishing the thing we want, but we're putting the human condition ahead. And it's cart before horse in the right order. That's the main thing. And realize that's what this is finding a good new owner to allow your business to go on in its direction and you to go on the direction. So those are the big ones.
Just on the owner thing, though,
yeah.
Hang on a second. because I want to get your view on this. What's your view on EOTs?
So
So
what
employee
yeah,
ownership trust for anyone who's not familiar with what that is.
Yeah, so EOTs are simply a tax wrapper.
Right.
So nothing we've talked about changes because everything I've talked about is A, either about people,
Okay.
or B, about the way profit drives a value of a company.
Right.
So the math doesn't change and the people issues don't change. So now you have a tax wrapper. So then you have to evaluate the mechanics of that tax wrapper in that light. Okay. We've had a lot of EOTs come back to us. And the reason is basically an EOT says, they're a good tax wrapper, by the way. I want to say that because they allow you to say, okay, I won't go find a new owner for this business. I'll let the employees have the business.
Yeah.
And the employees can use the profits of the business to pay me back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the nice thing about that is twofold. One is the amounts they pay me back are tax free.
Yep.
Whereas I'm paying either 14 or 24% tax.
Yep. True.
And I can do a higher number than, because I can make up the number.
Yeah.
Then
we have to evidence it, but or prove market comparables.
But you can juice it.
Yeah. Well, let's just say that there's flex.
Yeah, you can juice it. Yeah. So we've had them back because the issue you've got is, okay, well, so let's go through the people dynamic. What's the number one mission we're on? We have to. My X Factor leader is going to the beach in Spain.
Yeah.
He leaves a leadership void that needs to be filled. Okay. In the EOT, who is filling that? Well, the employees. Well, wait a minute. We just agreed X Factor leaders don't work for X Factor leaders.
Yeah.
So there's no one really in the company usually that can fulfill that leadership. Sure, there's managers, but they can fulfill that leadership role. So what happens is they end up tanking the company or not running it as well as he did. And two phenomenon happen. And I've seen this about half a dozen times in the last couple of years. One is he gets dragged back into it.
Yeah.
Okay. So mission fail because
he's not out.
He's not out. That was the mission, right? The second thing that happens is because they don't run it well, there's no profit. No profit means no money to pay him anything out for the business.
No freedom.
No profit means no money to pay anything to him for the business.
Yeah. So
he now ends up back with the business having got no money.
Yeah.
So no money times tax free is
no money.
Right.
And then you've still got to go through the ramp it back up phase.
Right.
Get it back into a state that you could
come to me, sell it. I've had
2 years,
three of those in the last 18 months.
2-year journey.
And it's painful.
Yeah.
Because now the key people that you turned it over to aren't happy and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's a difficult one to navigate with.
Yeah, the EOT people. Well, sometimes it makes sense. It's all about if as long as it fits.
Yeah.
So the EOT people, and they'll say, oh, the owner can stay in and stay on the board and all this. Well, wait a minute. Most companies are run by charismatic leaders. They're run by, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have an X Factor leader and a bunch of followers, for the most part. And so now, and that's why it works. You have Captain Kirk running the ship and stuff. He leaves and you need another Captain Kirk to come in. Well, now you get a situation where he has to run his company by committee.
Yeah.
People that used to report to him and 2 members of that committee are from the outside. They may not know anything about running companies and
it's a hard transition. It's definitely a hard transition.
And do companies even run well under that? Small companies under that structure?
I don't think there's enough data. I've seen both, right? So I've seen really successful people.
Yeah, I'm sure it can be.
Like Simon Morton did a great job with it.
Yeah.
But I think at the moment there isn't enough data long term in the space that we operate in, right? Like in the sort of the SME space of EOTs to know. I've seen like I've got a client, Andy and Matt with 10 vet practices that's done phenomenally well with it. So they can work, but I do think it's a cultural thing, and I do think it's how well you've groomed the next generation. What's your succession planning been like? Have you invested in all of that?
Yeah,
because I think I've seen it fail is when that investment hasn't happened. And it's gone through and they've not invested in the team, and then suddenly they're expecting them to step up and run this business. And I also think it goes back to the point you said earlier, which is about what's the certainty of income. And if a business is running with this a very certain, as a high recurring revenue model and stuff like that, which is hard to mess up, let's put it that way. I think those ones do really, really well. I think where the model isn't, the revenue isn't that as predictable, then I think there's a risk. And it's risk. It's all a lot of this is risk evaluation, right?
Yeah. No, and just to go back to say, there's nothing inherently wrong with an EOT. It's a tax wrapper.
It's a great tax wrapper. Right?
But that's what it is. And it doesn't somehow negate the need to have the fundamental issues with people and X factor leaders and all that. It's a wrapper. And if you can get the people side sorted out, sure. Yeah. It's a great tax wrapper.
Love it.
Yeah.
So you just to switch tack slightly for a second, you joined my F12 mastermind a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, after coming out to retreat.
Yes.
And I remember when we came out of retreat, it was quite a last minute thing. I had a spare place, you were able to make it and stuff. And obviously, part of what I do under the Grown Up Business brand is we run the Grown Up Business Retreat, and we're kind of getting to that time of year. It runs every October, come around again. What just if we could spend a few minutes just at the end, just what's been your experience of coming on those retreats?
So I did come on. You had a spot last minute.
Yeah.
And I remember my wife saying you need to go, and I sort of switched everything and went. And it was great. And I grew up in Southern California. I grew up with Tony Robbins and Brian Tracy and all that. And so I very naturally love you have that same vibe and stuff and I really like that. And I think a lot of times it's missing here. And it was just everybody got lifted up. And also the other thing I found was that I had something of value to offer the group. Massively. And so, but the reason that's important was the retreat was good and the content is good, but also the community is really important. But part of being part of the community is actually having something to offer, not just take away. Yeah. And so I was there going, okay, actually, I'm not just coming here as a taker. I can actually come here and contribute. Yeah. Then you have a super healthy situation, don't you? Well, so it was great.
I think our community is. I mean, I've had 3 phone calls with people recently in the last 7 to 10 days, where the conversation has gone, look, Paul, yeah, I want some coaching and I want some help from you around growing my business. But actually, what I want also is to be in a community of like-minded people or people doing cool stuff. One of the CEO said to me, I just want to be around a group of people who are doing cool stuff. Yeah. And there's not many communities in the UK that I've found the people who are doing really cool stuff. Yeah. And yours seems to be like that. And you've been in it for a while now. What's it like being in the community?
Well, I think it's multifaceted. So, we go to the events. You do a good job with a great job with content and the core stuff of getting us to look at goals and what we're doing as people and lifting us up. That creates the vibe. But then you get really good speakers to come in that compliment you, so we don't just hear your voice. I think that really helps. Yep. And then you get us all to in a formal way talk and communicate amongst ourselves, doing exercises and stuff like that. But then there's a whole bunch of time during our events, and then now just building relationships with people. And I've helped people sell businesses. I've helped so suddenly now we're all working as a group. Yeah. And we're on the same WhatsApp, and we have a we're on and you feel like you're in a group. And what happens, I've noticed, is that it's very easy as an entrepreneur to think the sky is falling. And when you're around other people, to see that they're going through the same struggles you are. Yeah. But also a lot of them have pushed through them and made it. Yeah. I think that's very inspiring and helpful, and it gets away from the lonely at the top. Yeah.
And I also feel the value in talking to somebody outside your own industry should never be underestimated. Right. Like one conversation with somebody who's not in your industry and asks, why do you do it that way? Yeah. Like, we do it this way. Why are you doing it that way? That seems really hard. And suddenly it can change your whole paradigm and your whole perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. And things like you take AI, I probably most of us wouldn't be nearly where we are without you identifying that really early and starting to get the group, because AI isn't just a thing that's static. It's constantly moving. Yeah. And so you've done your best to kind of keep up with that and keep up. And I feel like we're way ahead as a group because of that.
We're miles ahead. I have to say, I think at the moment our community is.
We've normalized it very early.
Very early. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think we are early adopters for sure. Yeah. And I think the speed that everyone is using it, it's really funny now. It's like, what Carly was, Carly, our AR expert in the group, was talking about a year ago, like we're all normalizing now. And yet the rest of the world, I mean, in the UK, teachers are going, we're just about to start using AI to grade students' papers. Right. And you're like, where are you? Like, we've been using it in businesses to do tenders, to do submissions. And I think it's interesting because I wonder, just going back to your point, I wonder, as businesses start to get sold, if one of the questions will be by buyers, how are you using AI in this business? How is it showing up?
Yeah.
I wonder how long before people start actively asking
Not yet.
that. No, but I think it'll come.
Yeah.
I think all people will be looking at it through the lens of, if I buy this business, can I create extra value by rolling out AI and automations and stuff like that?
Yeah. No, absolutely. But interestingly enough, that's why I think we're way ahead of the curve, because all my clients are business owners.
Yeah.
And people aren't talking about and using AI the way our group is.
Yeah.
But it's been hard, because when you're in I've been in IT my whole life, so I've been through these trends.
Yeah.
And when you're in this phase, nothing is fixed yet.
Yeah.
So you're doing a lot more work than people in later stages.
True.
But by the time it's a later stage, they will not be having the value that we're having, because we would implement it. So I think that's been really helpful.
So to wrap up, in terms of from my side of things, like what I like to ask everybody, what's your definition of a grown-up business? If someone comes to you, what do you look at to go, yeah, this is a grown-up business I could sell?
I think that it's back to the value drivers. They've achieved a certain level of EBITDA, which is different. Good is different for every business.
Yeah.
Good is. We hope it's above $500,000 a year. That they've sufficiently got themselves out of the, business from being a key person. Yeah. That they can leave. The business has good books and records. The good business has a diversified customer base. The business has gone into product lines and things that are not easily attacked by competitors and things like that.
Yeah, nice.
And just seems and runs in a sane way. That a new person can easily come into.
Yeah, runs in the same way is brilliant, because I think quite often there are a lot of businesses that don't run in the same way, and they're definitely not grown-ups, right?
Right.
Still teenagers having a tantrum.
Yeah, exactly. And so, so that's it. There's a maturity and a calmness, and we know what we're doing and all that. Yeah, absolutely.
Love it.
So, yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Thanks ever so much for being on the show.
Okay.
Absolutely brilliant.
My pleasure.
Great conversation. Make sure you click the links below. We'll link to Ken's book where you can grab that. We'll also drop in links to your LinkedIn profile so people can follow you and connect with you there. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next show. Take care. Bye for now. That concludes this episode of the Grown Up Business Podcast. I hope that got you fired up and ready to grow. The key thing, though, is to remember you get paid on what you get done. So write down the top 3 actions from this show and make sure that you implement those in the next 72 hours. Hey, and while you're at it, make sure you click the links and the resources below this episode to claim free growth resources to help you build the business you desire and deserve. I'll see you on the next episode.